Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 665, and today's date is May 12th, 2015, and the title of this episode is The Economy Continues to Spiral into a Full-Blown Collapse. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that Greece, they had a payment come due of about 750 million euro. And we're all out here trying to figure, how did they make this payment? We know they were raiding the pension funds. We know they were trying to get cash from municipalities. We realize they're placing taxes and capital controls on those people who want to withdraw money. But basically what Greece did, they avoided a default by raiding its emergency funds at the International Monetary Fund. Basically, Athens withdrew about 650 million euro from its IMF account in order to make the repayment. Now, this is not the only payment that Greece has. Greece has many more payments, and now they've used the emergency funds. They try to raise cash by implementing capital controls, raiding the pensions, and everything else. Basically, they're running out of options. They're running out of places to look, and maybe this is why they are looking at Russia and the BRICS system. And again, they meet in June. Varoufakis is out there, and he's Greece's finance minister. He is saying that, Greece has a serious liquidity problem. And after these 2 weeks, it just gets worse and worse as we go into the future. And basically, Greece has no money left. They're broke. They don't know which way to turn at this point. But we know Russia is extending a hand. We understand the BRICS system is extending a hand. And we'll have to see which way Greece turns at this time. Here in the United States, the illusion is alive. The United States government central bankers are keeping the illusion alive by manipulating all the data. But we look at the real economic indicators. We don't look at what they're telling us. Actually, we look at what they're telling us and we say, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. We see there are more layoffs. Patriot Coal has around 4,000 employees. They just filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Basically, most likely, they're going to have to liquidate. And there might be about 4,000 people out of work. I mean, this is the second largest coal miner east of the Mississippi, and the second largest producer of thermal coal in the eastern part of the United States. So this tells us everything is not fine. I mean, look, we have the Kirby Group, 200 more employees. Update, Lenovo, 235 nationwide. Zenith Education Group, 131. Unilever, moving Baltimore factory, 137 layoffs. It's continually happening. There are more and more layoffs. And people are like, no, there's no layoffs. Everything is fine. It's 5.4% unemployment. Everyone has work. It's getting better as time goes on. But of course, we see we are a part-time nation. The full-time great jobs, they're gone. And of course, the BLS, they're not even looking at the layoffs. They're just looking the other way and saying, no, there's no layoffs. There's no problems. Texas, full employment. Louisiana, full employment. There's no problems. The energy sectors, nothing. We're not even going to count them. But guess what? The JOLTS report came out. The monthly JOLTS report. And this is the job openings and labor turnover survey. And we're starting to see that things are not what the BLS says. I mean, did the BLS forget to count thousands of energy job losses and the rest of the layoffs? Yeah, they did. They completely left them out. JOLTS job openings, basically, we're seeing that things are completely falling apart. Openings are declining right now. And we can see they missed expectations by over 100,000. Tumbled from 5.144 million to 4.994 million, the biggest drop since 2014. Layoffs and discharges surged from 1.688 million to 1.793 million. Well, this tells us there are layoffs. This is the highest since last July. But the most notable aspects of today's JOLT data was that March layoffs in the Midwest region, also known as Texas and the various other shale-heavy regions, saw terminations soar to 455,000 from 340,000. Again, more evidence that shows to everyone that the BLS is not counting this. The biggest monthly total in layoffs for the region since June 2011 and the largest monthly jump since August of 2013. This confirms that BLS just decided not to include the people being laid off. And we can see right now, there is no way in the world that unemployment is at 5.4%. This means people have work. This means basically what they're trying to tell us is that everyone is employed and everyone is ready to spend that money. But we are not seeing this whatsoever. Actually, as the unemployment rate comes down, we have seen house sales and retail sales get worse. Does that make any sense? And now we see that, the retail report is out for April. Basically, they were hoping after the bad winter that the foot traffic and the sales were going to return. Now again, you have to remember, during the winter months they told us sales were terrible because of the snow, the cold weather, but then we would have seen online sales increase dramatically. They would be like, oh my God, online sales, they tripled. But no, we didn't see any of that whatsoever. So what are we seeing for April? Since we're in the warmer weather, snow has melted, the warmth is here. Some days it's a little cold, some days it gets warm. What are we seeing? Well, retail next April retail performance pulse report indicated that those metrics took another plunge. Yeah, in April, the retail sales were not there. Traffic dipped by 14.6% and sales showed a decrease of 12.5%. That's interesting. Transactions were also down 13.6%. So what are they blaming the poor sales on this time? You're never going to believe this. They're saying the slowdown in traffic and the decline of sales and transaction, it's blamed on spring break and Easter. This is what they're blaming it on. They're saying because of these two things, sales didn't pick up. They are just grabbing at anything at this point. I mean, seriously, actually, I would think sales would increase. Those kids coming out of college or in college and they're going out on spring break, they're buying bathing suits, they're going out and they're purchasing at restaurants, they're purchasing goods to go on spring break. Easter, people are out there getting new clothing. So I would think it was the opposite. But of course, they're saying, no, this is the reason. And what's going to happen in July? It's because of Memorial Day and 4th of July, when we move into the later spring and summer. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And we can see that sales are not getting better. Northeast has the largest dip on a year-over-year basis on its retail figures. Across the Northeast, sales were down 16.6%, and traffic was down 19.2%. In the Midwest, sales were down 12.2%, and traffic was down 10.7%. In the South, sales were down 12.5%, and traffic dipped to 14.1%. In the West, sales were down 8.2%, and traffic was down 12.7%. Basically, what they're telling us is, don't worry, we're in a recovery, retail sales are fine. And we're just going to blame it on the weather, we're going to blame it on holidays. Anything that we can think of, that's what we're going to blame it on. But the only thing they're not blaming it on is the economy. And that is what is failing. We are spiraling into a full-blown collapse scenario. And they can't stop it. There are more and more layoffs. People are not working. It's proven by the JOLTS report. BLS has been lying. The government has been lying. Central bankers telling us lies once again. I mean, they told us lies prior to the collapse of 2008, when they told us everything is contained. They're not forecasting a recession. Don't worry. Just keep spending. Keep going into debt. That's what we want you to do. And they're continually telling everyone that debt is good. Well, debt is not good. Not when you can't pay it back. I don't believe debt is good at all. If we were in a system where we didn't have a central bank, things would be a lot better off. We see that home ownership is continually declining. The recent improvements in home values has helped, but this largely was helped by investors. Since the last decade, we have gained about 10 million renting households while losing 1 million homeowners. At the core, a healthy housing market is one where owner-occupied buyers dominate the bulk of home sales. This is not the case today. Basically, what's happening is those hedge funds, investors, cash buyers that are getting the free money from the Fed, they are now pulling back significantly. It is dropping. And they're trying to unload. And this is what the wealthy do at this point in time. The people that have the inside knowledge, the people that receive the free money and say, listen, this is what we want you to do, and we will give you the signal of when to pull out. They do this in the stock market, where they try to unload everything to retail investors, and those retail investors are holding all these stocks as it's crashing. And those people are on the back end basically making a profit. Many of the homes people are reporting right now are ghost homes. What does that mean? That means these are houses that people have purchased and there's no one living in them. They haven't seen people there in a year, but they were purchased. The for sale sign came down. Basically, the home ownership rate is back to where it was 25 years ago. So around this country, we're seeing investors, hedge funds, those people that get free money from the Fed, purchasing these homes in cash and just leaving them. They are ghost homes. And now if they can rent them out, they rent them out. If they can't, they just let them sit. Because the Fed has given strict instructions to those banks, do not foreclose on a home. Let the people stay in there. We don't want the house on the market. Those people who are buying the houses in cash, keep them. Rent them if you can, but you will not sell them. This will drive the prices up. This is what we're seeing right now. And at the same time this is happening, the everyday American is not out there purchasing. Mortgage applications are declining. Mortgage departments have laid off. This is a signal to us that this is a setup. We see the Baltic Dry Index, it climbed up to 589. It climbed up 11 points. It's still under the 600 mark. But we have to look back in time. I mean, the Baltic Dry Index is the raw material that's used for factories. Since the people are not purchasing, just like we reported in the retail sales, factories aren't producing. If factories aren't producing, they don't need the raw material. And this is why we see the Baltic Dry Index under the 600 point level at this time. And basically what's happening when we look back in time to last year, when it was around 900 points. When we look back to the year previous to this was at almost 1,200 points. A year before that is around 1,400 points. We are at a very low point. We're in depression area right now. I mean, look at the number of manufacturing jobs that are lost. 7.2 million manufacturing jobs lost. This means it's down 37% from 1979 peak. We have lost the ability to manufacture. The United States is continually moving jobs, manufacturing, out of the U.S. And this is why we see the economy collapsing. We don't produce anything. We're a consumption-based economy where we just purchase from other countries. And this cannot be sustained. It just won't work. And we can see it isn't. And especially the central bankers now are pumping more and more debt into the system. This debt system cannot be sustained. I mean, we look around and we see that 22 of the U.S. states are officially broke. They can't raise the revenue. They don't have the tax revenue coming in. Actually, it's plunging. Now think about this for a second. If tax revenue is plunging, that means people do not have jobs. Because when you have a job, you have tax revenue. When people own homes, you have tax revenue. If the bank owns a home, a little different. So what we're seeing right now is the people in each of these states, either they're working at a part-time job, which means less tax revenue, and we see that, these states are having a very difficult time surviving. I mean, out of the 22 that are broke, 17 are saying, we have seen a major decline in tax revenue from the previous year. Now, how can this be if there are more people working? Again, it doesn't make sense. And we're putting all the dots and drawing the lines, two of them, and we're putting together a picture of why the economy is in a full-blown collapse at this time, and why what the government is telling us cannot be true. Because if it is true, then we would see increased tax revenue. We would see retail sales improving. We would see home sales improving. But again, it's a complete illusion. It's an illusion that the U.S. government central bankers got together and pumped up the system with free money. This is where quantitative easing went, and it's still going. This is what Europe is doing right now. The same exact thing, to pump up the economies to make it look like everything is fine. Now, why would they do that? And think about this. How long can they do this? Well, so far they've done it since 2008. But the real question is, why would they do this? Because they know it can't be sustained. They know they can't keep doing this forever. Eventually things will fall apart. So what are they planning? Because there has to be an end game, and we know there is. It's to blame this on another country or group and blame them for the economic collapse, because they don't want to be blamed. And this will bring us to war. This is what they've been planning. And they needed this time period to prepare, and this is what they've been doing. If we've been watching them, we've been listening, and we've been seeing what they're doing. I mean, think about it. The Treasury right now is going to hold cash on hand for a year, just in case, and of course they're using the excuse of a natural disaster or some type of other disaster. NORAD is refurbishing Cheyenne Mountain. Why are they doing this at this point? Something is up. Something's going on. And we know what it is. It's the entire complete collapse of the system. And they've been studying civil unrest since 2008, trying to get a handle on it and how they can control what's going on. They've been increasing the guards at the government buildings. They've been basically putting in buffer zones, putting more steel spikes on the fence outside the White House. This tells us that they're definitely getting prepared. And we realize that Obama has many different strategies, and of course he's taking his order from the central banks. And we understand that he's bringing in illegals over the border right now. As soon as they cross the border, DHS, Border Patrol, hands off, can't touch them. And we know they're all part of different agendas. And there's not just one, there's always many. We know they can be placed into businesses, they're not penalized. We know that they can take out student loans now, they can take out auto loans. And we understand that they'll be able to join the military. And right now, Obama wants the military to start recruiting illegal aliens. the Pentagon is speeding up its recruitment of illegal immigrants in a program that fast-tracks them to U.S. citizenship. They're just bringing in more and more of the illegals to keep this system going, and they're preparing them for war. We can see what is going on here. It's right in front of our faces. We understand that Obama is trying to fast-track the TPP. The Senate today is going to be holding their vote to see if they should fast-track it. And basically, the fast-track negotiating authority for trade agreements is the authority of the President of the United States to negotiate international agreements that Congress can approve or disapprove but cannot amend or filibuster, also called the Trade Promotion Authority, TPA. Since 2002, fast-track negotiating authority is a temporary and controversial power granted to the President by Congress. It creates special rules that empower the White House to negotiate and sign trade agreements without congressional oversight. Well, as of right now, the Senate voted against fast-tracking the TPP. But what's very interesting about the TPP, and we discussed this many times, where we as a people cannot read it because it's national security. Congress has to go into a room. They can't bring a phone. They can't take pictures. If they take notes, they have to turn them in, and they can't discuss it with anyone. It's a complete secret. But even though that you and I cannot see it, Congress has to be in special rooms, and they have to sign 27 different documents swearing them to secrecy. Guess who can read it? If you're part of the 28 U.S. government appointed trade advisory committees providing advice to the U.S. negotiators, they can read it. The committees with the most access to what's going on in the negotiations are 16 industry trade advisory committees. Now, who are they? Well, let's see who they are. AT&T, General Electric, Apple, Dow Chemicals, Nike, Walmart, and the American Petroleum Institute. They have the ability to read it. This TPP and TPIP, this is not for the people. This is for the corporations. They drafted it. They created it. And it is all being done for them, the central bankers, and not for the people. Not for the people of Europe, not for the people of the United States. Now, the FBI seems like they're basically violating their own rules by spying on certain activists. Now, under the agency's guidelines, the FBI is really not allowed to get involved in sensitive political issues. However, the FBI agents violate this rule by closely monitoring activists who oppose the construction of the controversial pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline. The FBI collected information about forthcoming protests, cultivated informants, and gathered data about some activists. The FBI document also referred to the protesters as environmental extremists. Now, we understand the FBI not only did this with the Keystone Pipeline, they have also done this with Occupy Wall Street, with Ferguson and Baltimore, where they spy on the activists, they label them extremists, and if they have to take them out, they will. As we know in Occupy Wall Street, they had snipers waiting and ready to go. If they were given the green light, they would have taken innocent people out. All for the bankers. And we can see that they're not just doing this with these activist groups. They're doing it across the United States. They're creating their own social profiles on people and who they are in contact with, what groups they belong to. And they're doing this on purpose because they understand when this system falls apart, they will have those lists. And I refer back to Ukraine. When the United States was first implementing their coup d'etat, where they spent $5 billion, and they already had a puppet government already picked out, when they went to the southeastern area of Ukraine, they asked the local law enforcement and this was at the beginning stages, for a list of those people who would be a threat to the new system. And remember, the new puppet government in Ukraine, they were taking orders from the U.S. government central bankers. And the local authorities there gave over the lists. What do you think is happening here today in the United States? Think about your local police and how DHS is infiltrating the local police with, tanks, stingray devices, machine guns. Because when the time is right and ready, they will ask if they haven't asked already. But we can see, as the police are using the stingray devices, they don't want to reveal that they're using them, so they keep it a secret. Even in the court of law, they don't want to reveal that they're using the stingray devices because they sign a non-disclosure agreement with the FBI and the manufacturer. They are using these devices to spy on every single person because it basically mimics a cell phone tower, and it captures your phone calls, your texts, your email on a local level. They brought it down, the spying, to a local level. And we see Washington State is fighting back. Governor Jay Inslee, he added his signature to HB 1440 on Monday this week, authorizing a law that effective immediately requires police officers to obtain search warrants before deploying cell site simulators. They have to have a good reason to use it. And they have to go in front of a judge and prove they have a reason, probable cause, for this search warrant. And if they don't, they're not going to get one, and they can't use the devices. This is a good thing that we are seeing. We understand that the Patriot Act is due to expire June 1st. And basically right now, they have the U.S. Freedom Act. We see that there are efforts right now on the way to basically push through and just renew the Patriot Act at this time. Lawmakers have threatened to filibuster renewal of the Patriot Act if no action is taken. But we have to look at this very carefully, because we know the Second Circuit Court of Appeals has said this is completely illegal. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. And of course, President Obama was out there, and many other government officials who said, we're going to revamp the system. Well, they didn't do it. Of course they didn't. And right now, we can see that they're looking to renew it. I mean, if we look at Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, he wants this thing to be renewed. But how can a program be reauthorized and extended for 5.5 years if it was deemed illegal? Actually, we didn't need the courts to say it was legal. The people said, listen, this is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. That means this is completely illegal. You can't write a law that is repugnant to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. There was a Supreme Court case that said anything that is repugnant to the Constitution or the Bill of Rights is basically null and void. And this is what they did. They created the Patriot Act, and they tried to say, Section 215, that gives us permission to spy on the people without warrants. No, it doesn't, because we still have the Constitution and the Bill of Rights that says you cannot. Now we have a court ruling saying it's completely illegal. So this should be a no-brainer. It just expires, and everything they have needs to be dismantled. They do not need to spy on the American people whatsoever. Now, out in Ukraine, we see something very interesting happening. And like I said in my past reports, I do believe that Ukraine, along with the U.S. government central bankers who are orchestrating everything and helping them, they will mount a major offensive, most likely come this late spring or summer. We see they're building up to it. And we see, instead of Poroshenko following the Minsk II agreement, which is a ceasefire, he's going off and creating other bills like a bill that would declare martial law in Ukraine. And the Ukrainian parliament has approved new regulations on martial law, which among other things allows the extrajudicial detention and relocation of Russian citizens in the country. The law was approved by 254 deputies out of 322. It regulates how martial law can be declared in Ukraine and the changes to legal procedures it brings. These changes include forced relocation of the citizens of a foreign country who threaten or undertake aggression towards the puppet government. Now remember this. Think about what's going on there, because this is orchestrated and directed by the U.S. government. Apart from the relocation of foreign citizens, martial law will allow Ukrainian authorities to confiscate private property, regulate mass media, prohibit any rallies, marches, and other mass gatherings, and initiate the legal process of banning any political party or mass media deemed acting against Ukraine's puppet government. Basically a dictatorship. It also entails labor conscription for all able-bodied Ukrainians not currently in the army, and a possible curfew. In areas of actual fighting, the role of local authorities is passed on now to the military. So the local authorities basically will give all their authority and power over to the military. Now remember, the U.S. government central bankers are orchestrating what's going on in Ukraine. They are now training forces in Ukraine. Biden was in Ukraine making deals with Poroshenko, directing him with the FBI, with the CIA. They were all in there discussing their next steps. Forget about the Minsk II deal. That's already gone. That has so many violations, they're not following it whatsoever. They are getting ready for something big. Now, as we know, and I mentioned this before just about a second ago, the U.S. is training the military in Ukraine. And as of right now, U.S. military delegation headed by Army Commander in Europe, Lieutenant General Frederick Ben Hodges, prepares to visit the training center in Ukraine. Since April, we've had U.S. paratroopers in Ukraine. They're training the forces right now. And we can see that Russia is out there saying, this completely violates the Minsk peace deal, the Minsk II ceasefire deal between Kiev and the rebels. Specifically, the Minsk II agreement says there should be no foreign military in Ukraine. But the U.S. government central bankers, they do not care. They have the military there. So does the UK, so does Poland, so does many other countries. And we can see Poroshenko, he's out there saying, yeah, we violated the Minsk II agreement. And they have. I mean, the Ukrainian president's decision to reclaim the Donetsk airport, a key strategic point in the conflict in the country's east, it's in violation of the Minsk peace deal. Poroshenko vowed on Monday to take the airport back. I have no doubt we will free the airport because it is our land, and we will rebuild the airport. Petro Poroshenko. That's what he said. He also promised to erect a monument to the cyborgs. Well, the cyborgs is a nickname for the Ukrainian soldiers that fought against the forces of the self-proclaimed Eastern Republics of the controlled Donetsk airport, and they call themselves the cyborgs now. So basically what's going on here, he's saying that we're getting ready to take back the southeastern section of Ukraine. We're getting ready to then go into the Donetsk area and retake the airport. And when all of this is done, from our new lethal weapons, from the training, we will then attack Crimea and take back Crimea. This is basically what he is saying. And they are getting ready. We see there's propaganda already out there, because propaganda is ahead of what is coming, because they have to make you believe that this is the reason they're doing it. So right now we have the NATO commanders out there telling us that Russia is invading. They have thousands of tanks, thousands of troops. We just can't show you on satellite because they're very well hidden. All these thousands upon thousands of military men and equipment. And we can see out on the social media, the U.S. now is pushing propaganda using social media, specifically on Twitter, Facebook, saying that, these Boris Nemtsov documents, this was the person that was killed in Russia, who they were blaming on Putin, because they're saying that Nemtsov was basically an opposition figure. But again, if Putin was going to shoot or get rid of him, he wouldn't do it out in public. I mean, basically, it would have been done in a different way. Of course, as we know, Putin has been and is a member of the KGB. And of course, the document was never finished. But those people who are loyal to Nemtsov, propagandists, they decided to put it all together. And now they're pushing out on Twitter, and they're continually doing this over and over, telling everyone that according to these documents, the Russian military, with all their equipment, they are in Ukraine. Now at this point, we should have about, 150,000 soldiers from Russia? About 20,000 tanks? I mean, this is what they're continually telling us. And we should have satellite photos that shows us all of this, but we have none of this. You know why? Because it's propaganda. We see Japan has announced it will let the U.S. Air Force deploy a number of CV-22 Osprey aircraft at an airbase in western Tokyo. Now, the people are completely against this. The government has been trying to allay fears from the locals who say, we do not want this here, we don't want a base, we don't want this at all. And of course, they're out there saying, this is good for Japan. It will protect you. It's great to have a U.S. alliance. We need this for security because of what's going on with China. And the people are not buying it. But of course, when do governments ever listen to the people? They're bringing in the Osprey. Now, Japan is poised to replace UK as America's global strategic partner. A new global U.S. partnership is emerging that could replace the U.S. special relationship with Britain. The formation of this new strategic relationship can be credited to the rise of China. And we can see this is exactly what is forming. They want to move the base to a new location to bring in more sophisticated weapons. They're bringing in the Osprey. They're building Japan up. Japan's trying to change Article 9. They're on their way from becoming a pacifist nation to an aggressor, where they can go around the world and help the U.S., and they can go ahead and attack if necessary. So we can see things are definitely changing. Now the UN out in the Middle East is preparing to bring in humanitarian aid to Yemen. We understand there is a ceasefire, and as we know, the ceasefire, the U.S., Saudis, they are building up their forces on the border. They are repositioning. They are getting ready to attack once the ceasefire is done. They're only doing this because there was a lot of pressure from the UN and other countries saying, listen, these people need food, they need fuel, and you're hurting the population. So they decided, let's have a 5-day ceasefire. We will coordinate and figure out the positioning of the Houthi soldiers and anything else they have, and we will get ready to bombard them once the ceasefire is over. And this is exactly what they're doing. Iran is trying to bring in humanitarian aid. They have cargo ships headed towards Yemen. They are escorted by warships. Now, of course, the United States government central bankers want them to do something very specific. They want them to take their cargo ships to Djibouti. And in Djibouti, the UN will then take the supplies and distribute it to Yemen. Now we'll have to see how Iran reacts to this. Will they try to enter the ports of Yemen, or will they listen to the United States? And the United States, the warmongers, are out there hoping that Iran does not listen and they try to get through the ports because this will be their excuse. And if they can't have Iran do something, they will try to have it done for them. And this is some type of false flag event that we need to watch very carefully. Just like that ship that was brought into the port of Iran, they were making it a big deal. It was over a financial matter. They owed a debt. That was it. But it looks like, from everything that we see, that ship was steered into Iranian waters on purpose to build this up and to escalate the situation. We might see the same thing once again with this ship that's coming in. We see right now that jets are targeting ammunition dumps near the Yemen capital hours before the ceasefire. They're not letting up whatsoever. We also understand that Kerry is meeting Putin and Lavrov. And what's very interesting about this is that U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is looking to probe Russia in their willingness to curb its involvement in Ukraine and in the backing of Syria. We mentioned this yesterday. This is the main goal. This is not for peace. This is not for better relations between the U.S. and Russia. This is done specifically to say, listen, we're getting ready for something huge here. And of course, he's not saying it in these type of words, but they're trying to get a feel and try to discuss the situation and have Russia kind of back off. Don't support Assad right now. Let us in. Let us take over the southeastern area. This doesn't have to be a full-out war at this time. We would like to prop up the dollar, and we need this. This is what they're trying to do at this point in time. We see the U.S., from everything that we're looking at, and especially this meeting with Russia, they are definitely making a play for Syria. And I can see how this is going down at this point in time. We know the Islamic State is part of the proxy army for the United States, Israel, UK, and other nations. Basically what's happening right now, and it's out in the corporate media, they're saying if Assad loses power, that means the Islamic State will take over all the territories. Now think about this for a second. If the Islamic State takes over the territories, what is the United States going to do? Do they really care about these people? No. They have the authorization for war to go after the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, or any other terrorist organization. Even though it is their proxy army, they could care less about it once they don't need it. Basically, what they're going to do is they're going to have the Islamic State, they're training the Free Syrian Army, take out Assad. At least they're going to try to. Then the U.S. is going to say, now the Islamic State owns Syria. Now it's okay for the U.S. to go into Syria because Assad is out of power, and they can just bring the troops in there and go after the Islamic State. This is the plan they are about to use. This is why the Islamic State has been pushed towards Damascus. This is why they want a safe haven in the other parts of Syria where the Syrian army is completely out of it and the Islamic State and the Free Syrian Army have taken control. This way they can say, this is no longer part of Syria. We can bring the U.S. troops into here, and now we have a launching pad to get into Damascus. This is what they're trying to do at this point. And we can see right now the propaganda is still running wild here in the United States. We see a former CIA deputy director is saying, this is Michael Morrell, he is saying that yes, we could see another Islamic State attack just like the 9/11 attack, which was not by Al-Qaeda, by the way. It was done by the inner workings of the United States, Mossad, and other organizations. And we can see right now that they are definitely planning for something big. How many warnings have we heard in the past couple of months about another 9/11? We've already seen a botched terrorism campaign in Texas. It didn't work out. That doesn't mean they're not going to try another one. We can see they are planning. We can see they are ready to go. They understand the economy is failing. And as we get closer and closer to July and August, they're getting ready to go into the southeastern area of Ukraine. They're getting ready to go full throttle into Libya, Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, and definitely Syria. If the P5+1 talks do not give the central bankers what they want, they will go into Syria, then eventually go right into Iran. And this is why John Kerry is out there trying to negotiate with Russia. But if they have to go to war, they will. They won't stop until they reach their goal. Tactics will change. The goal never does. Think about it. Back in August of 2013, going into September, October, when Putin had the peace deal and the attack was called off, and they said, oh yeah, we just want the chemical weapons removed. That's all we want. We don't want Syria. Here we are in 2015, and they are still doing the same thing because they have not reached their goal. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.